Welcome to our podcast. I'm excited to introduce our guest, Yara Mohiar. Yara holds a master's in vision science, and she is currently pursuing her PhD in the same field. With over 2 years of TA experience, Yara's passion for teaching is matched by her talent for simplifying complex topics and mentoring future healthcare providers. Today, we'll dive into her academic journey, her vision for the future of health science education, and explore her Jordanian and Palestinian background. What is preventing us from going to Mars, Yara?
A disease called SANS.
Please explain.
Yeah, so it's a syndrome that astronauts have been found to come back with, and it stands for Space-Associated Neuroocular Syndrome. And essentially, astronauts are not able to stay too long in space because there's an optic disc swelling happening. That's one of the main signs of SANS. And
Astronauts, but that are men.
yes, men. It's honestly, like it happens to women as well. It's just that, you know how any disease works. You need a specific amount or extent of criteria of the disease in order to classify it as that disease. So you wait for a certain level of signs and then you say, okay, this is SANS. So it's not that women have not been shown to have any signs, it's just that they were not enough to an extent to classify it and to diagnose it that way.
So things changed since 2020 when you did your 3-minute thesis, right? You got more information, right?
That was still the case. I was just trying to make it more of a catchy phrase. It's still technically true.
It's still technically true. Okay.
Yeah.
I see. You were talking about a syndrome that was preventing us from going to Mars. Can you tell us what is the syndrome?
Yeah, so it's called SANS, and it stands for Space-Associated Neuroocular Syndrome. In essence, it's a bunch of diseases and signs and symptoms happening to the eye in astronauts that are spending too much time in space. The lack of gravity to pull all the fluids and all that pressure in your body back down to your feet is not present for months on end. So all of the pressure buildup in your head from the different bodily fluids leads potentially to what is an optic disc swelling, an optic disc edema. That's one of the main signs of SANS. And it's why they can't stay too long in space, because it's a nerve. And if the damage is persistent, you can go blind. You can't. You need to come back to Earth, let that swelling go down, and go back to normal. That's the main sign. And for SANS, I think if you consider the way, like what the potential issue is, we were looking into theories of what could have been causing it. It is idiopathic, so we don't know what the cause of SANS actually is. It's all
what's idiopathic?
Of an unknown cause. Yes.
I'm not an academic, so I have
no
no
idea. I tend to. You really have to be in there.
It's just for the listeners, basically.
For sure, yeah, no, you're right. And so I think a way to mitigate it is to find ways to pull the bodily fluids down to your feet. First, we have to start with actually pinpointing what the issue is. Mm-hmm. We thought it might be an interaction between intracranial pressure and intraocular pressure, but regardless, we need to mitigate that while you're in space. If you can find a way, and there are different studies on this, but none of them are actually sustainable long-term in space. So we just, first of all, need to really make sure we know what the cause is in order to solve it. And the other thing I'd say is, for people with glaucoma, if you look at it, they kind of have
What's glaucoma?
Glaucoma is basically, it's usually 3 things that happen. You have an increase in your eye pressure, and the angle, okay, you know what, I'm not going to get technical with this. Glaucoma is a disease of the eye, usually happens with age, and it leads to optic disc excavation, opposite of swelling. So it'll be more inwards instead of bulging outwards into the eye. Mm-hmm. And so if you consider that, I think it would be interesting to maybe send people with glaucoma in space, and then they'll be fine. Maybe.
Okay. So just to summarize, basically, people that go into space get a specific disease. That disease is still, the reason for the disease is still unknown. You have a theory behind it.
Yes.
Okay. And your solution for it would be to potentially send people with a disease from Earth to go over there.
Yeah, but I mean, not truly, but I mean, just looking at the interactions of pressures, I think we just really need to find a way to get the fluids of your body back down to your feet while in space.
Very inspiring.
Yeah, very.
Are you very optimistic that we're going to be able one day to go to Mars or no? Honestly.
Honestly?
Yeah.
Honestly? Honestly, I think all this money should be spent on diseases on Earth. And it's why I actually switched topics for my PhD. I want to work on something that affects more people on a daily basis, not a few astronauts trying to find life on a different planet. Like, why don't we just preserve the life we have here? That's my personal opinion.
I love that opinion.
Thanks.
And tell us, I mean, how did Yara Mohiar, I said it right?
Mohiar, yes.
Mohiar.
Yeah.
Mohiar, not
yeah, I know,
Mohiar.
it's confusing.
Go into Masters in Vision Science, and how come you did that 3-minute thesis competition?
Good question. So the reason I did a master's to begin with is because despite being raised here, my undergrad ended up being in Jordan. And I wanted a degree that was more universal, that would serve me no matter where I ended up working in the world. And we all know that degrees from the West are more valuable in that sense. So that's why I did a master's. And why I joined the 3MT, I think it got routine. It's a lot of research and reading and writing. And I do care to do well in that area. But my real passion and reason for even pursuing grad school is teaching. And in the 3MT, it was an opportunity to try and explain or simplify a difficult concept to a general audience that is not an expert in the field. And I thought that was a nice challenge, because if I could do that, it would further my ability to teach better in the future, to simplify concepts, whatever it is that I'm teaching.
Okay. And tell us, like, you placed first and second, and I was a bit confused with those rankings. Can you please explain what happened exactly?
Of course. So the first level, you compete at the faculty level. So that I was in the Faculty of Science. And at that level, I was first place. But then the second level is university level. And at that level, I scored second place.
And you're also the crowd's favorite?
Yes, I
Okay.
was. Oh,
So
you
there's-
looked into that. That's nice. Yes, I got the Audience Choice Award.
Okay. That's good. That's good. And now you're pursuing your PhD. In what exactly?
I am. It's in a different field right now. I'm focusing on the attention system, so it's very fundamental research. We're trying to better understand how attention is impacted in people with concussions, and we're trying to find tests that are more objective measures of this deficit in attention and how it's being affected exactly.
Okay. And you mentioned that your passion was actually teaching, right?
Yes.
Okay. What do you like about teaching?
I like the moment where I get to look into a student's eye and I can see the moment they get it and that light bulb switches on. I feel like that's very rewarding in itself, that, you know, a lot of the time they're quiet and they don't feel comfortable asking a question, but hopefully we reach a point where they are, and I get to see that light eventually.
Did you notice that you liked teaching since you were young, or when you went into your degree?
Since I was young. I mean, if you have siblings, you kind of have to help them and teach them different classes as they're growing older. So I've always enjoyed it, I think. And it's how I would waste time from doing my own work, helping others with their work.
That's nice. You mentioned something on the phone regarding teaching students and the fact that usually they have something called the Imposter Syndrome. Can you elaborate exactly what do you mean by that?
Of course. So imposter syndrome, it does impact different areas of life, but it's a known thing in academia. And so it's usually researchers or professors or people in academia who feel like they're not good enough, they don't deserve to be there. It doesn't matter what they achieved. They feel like, I don't deserve to be here, I'm an imposter. And yeah, it has a lot to do with some negative self-talk and confidence issues, I would say.
Okay, and how do you see it? Like, how does it translate in class?
So for me, I felt it when I was a teaching assistant during my master's degree. I was teaching people older than me.
In Montreal?
In Waterloo, Ontario.
Where you did your test?
Where I did the master's.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's where.
Mhm.
So that's where I was teaching for the first time, and it was people older than me, and there is a gap in knowledge between what we learn in Jordan in the field of optometry, which is what my bachelor's in, versus what they teach them here. It's more intense here. So it's more like a 7 to 8 year program. In Jordan, it was just a 4-year program. So I had to bridge that gap. And again, they were older than me, so I felt like I don't belong here. I'm an imposter. What do I know? How are they going to respect me? Mm-hmm. All of that talk. Imposter syndrome, essentially.
And how did you bridge that gap?
So I could give you a generic answer, and then I could give you what worked further for me.
It's a long format podcast, so you can take your time.
Okay. So the generic answer is if you look at the definition of confidence, it's trusting in one's abilities. So I trust my ability to do what I say I'm going to do, to keep my promises to myself. I trust that things will work out, that things will be fine even if I don't get what I want. And in that sense, it's trust in something else or in God. So the generic answer would be working on ways to increase your confidence, whether it's you keep your promises to yourself or you work on developing new skills. When you do that and you get comfortable with being uncomfortable, you feel like you're building character, and you feel like with time, it doesn't matter. I'm constantly adapting to different things. I'll be fine. And that's the more generic answer, I'd say. But another way that I've benefited personally is I stopped looking at it in the sense of, what if I mess up? What will they think of me? What if I'm not knowledgeable enough to be here teaching? I looked at it, it's very me. If you think of it, it's a bit like the ego is taking control of you. And instead I started looking at it as more of being in the service industry. What can I offer? What can I teach these people? And approaching it with curiosity. I don't need to know all the answers. I care to do well, but I don't need to know all the answers. And I'm happy to learn on the spot with someone else. I even did that in an exam. As I was being quizzed, I was supposed to know the answers, but even if I didn't, it was fine. And they want to see critical thinking skills more than you knowing everything. But that's a different topic. So mainly go in thinking of being in the service industry. I'm here to help. And also, I don't need to keep wondering if I deserve to be there. You don't need to, because someone else already vetted me and thought that this person is deserving of being in this position when I was hired. So you have to, I think that helps when you remember that, to feel like there's no need to be so hard on yourself, and just be present and take it easy. It's not that serious.
So just to summarize, work hard and be humble?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. And those teaching skills, I mean, you meet a lot of different people with different personalities, right? I mean, how do those skills, translate into real life, for example, marriage, divorce, business, etc.?
Could you please clarify what you mean?
Okay. So basically, when I'm a teacher, I meet a lot of different people, right? And accordingly, I'm adapting constantly. So you could say it's like I'm in a business meeting. Whenever I sit down with somebody, he comes up to me with a different question, a different approach. I'll have to adapt. Same thing with relationships, be it a marriage or be it a friendship. Everybody has a different personality. Some people get ticked off of certain things, so you have to be aware of that. And considering you're a TA, you're basically their boss, quote unquote. You have to take that into consideration. So it's not a friend-to-friend relationship. It's a boss or a teacher-to-student relationship. How do you think that helped you translate that into real life?
I guess you're right. I guess in a sense, some students will have a bad day, and even if you get 100 amazing comments thanking you, and if you get one negative one, you tend to hyper-focus on it. Okay. But I think if you can learn, and I've learned how to navigate these negative interactions. You take them on the side, you have a one-on-one where you're understanding that it really is about their day. It's absolutely about them. It's people, we all do it, we all project, and we make it, it's it's you're the one who upset me. It's learning how to communicate with people who are not in the best state of mind. And I think that's a skill that can be translated to relationships in general.
Yeah, marriages too, right? At the end of the day, if the husband and wife, the wife, let's say she's working or she's a housewife and the husband is working, comes back, he has a bad day. If you can't, as a wife, if you can't understand that he's in a state of mind that he's tired, for example, you won't be able to necessarily appreciate his efforts and understand that maybe he needs just 5 minutes to rest so that you don't necessarily disturb him.
Exactly.
And as a husband, maybe if your wife has been waiting for you all day, maybe you should appreciate the fact that she's dedicating either her life for the kids or for the house, and you should give her 5 minutes so that she feels that attention.
Absolutely.
Do you feel like that translates well?
I do. I think it's just being an understanding person, knowing how to communicate in a way where you get what you want. You know, it's not about being right. It's looking at it as we're a team, whether it's with the student or with, in a marriage or a business partner. Right. We're a team. It's us against the problem, as cliche as that sounds. It is. Like, let's figure out what's happening. How can we move forward from here? It's a lot of there are a lot of nuances to how to communicate with different people. I think it's always interesting. But there are all these videos out there that tell you how to communicate and say this and say that. I think when you end up with one person, you'll see what that person needs. It's never the size fits all. It's not.
Why do you think people resist it?
Resist communicating properly?
Exactly.
It's the ego trying to be right. Mm-hmm. We're more concentrated, I think, on being the winner of the argument. Mm-hmm. And protecting our ego, and because you just attacked it's either a power imbalance, you feel like the power, or it's about respect, or there's an underlying thing that you just touched, a nerve in that person, and they're gonna be defensive. So I think it's an art to not get people defensive when you want to talk to them about something bothering you.
Do you think it's that simple though? That it's just the ego? Do you think sometimes people are just different? And they can just find the common ground?
I believe for some people that is the case. But I also feel like if someone is truly self-aware as in, I know how I talk, I know that sometimes this is misinterpreted, I know what I need to work on, and I'm okay with that, and I want to improve, they will find common ground. Everyone has a little bit of that, I think, and there are different variations of that level, and I think you just need enough on both sides to find that common ground.
The reason I'm asking that is we come from a similar background. Usually the typical rule is the man works really hard and the wife takes care of the house.
Yeah.
Now, let's use your example. For example, you're an academic, you worked really hard to get where you are, and you're passionate, obviously, about what you do. And if you get a position, inshallah, hopefully, as a TA or even a professor in a university, I'm pretty sure you're going to be reluctant, regardless of what your husband does, to just leave it on the side for the family. So what I mean is, if a person comes into the relationship expecting you to understand that this is your heritage and you should be able to let that go.
Yeah.
And you saying, well, we live in Montreal or live in Canada or even in Jordan, Lebanon. I mean, people are past that now.
Because the economy forced them to
sometimes it's not the ego. Sometimes it's just, look, I'm expecting this from you, and no, I want this.
You're right. You're right.
So sometimes, like, I'm not gonna let go the fact that I want to come back and find my wife at home, and you are like, okay, but I'm not gonna leave those 10, 15 years of studying for no reason.
Yeah.
And it's not about ego or not.
But there's a compromise, I think. Look, you're absolutely right. There's a certain level of background where you're too different. Mm-hmm. And usually you could look at the families and how they brought up their kids. But even then, what you're saying, there's a compromise. There is because again, if you're talking to someone reasonable, hopefully you'll have married someone reasonable, and again, able to reflect.
Hopefully that conversation is before marriage.
Hopefully, hopefully, yes, that would be nice. They would be able to tell you what exactly doesn't sit well with them. So why exactly it is that I want my wife to stay at home. And it's not always just, it's tradition, it's the way it is. I think a lot of people are better at communicating why than that. And often you'll hear that I'm worried about the kids and how they're going to end up being raised, if someone's going to raise them, either you or society. And at that point, I understand. So on my end, despite all my effort and all these years of education, I don't want to just hang the diploma on the wall at the end. But I'm willing to do part-time, and I do also agree that kids, until they reach a certain age, need your full focus. Mm-hmm. So it would be the compromise. Okay, these are your concerns. This is how we can take care of them. Till the age of this, I will not work, let's say. I can't. I don't even have the energy. Frankly, I don't know how these women do it. They're working and raising a 2-year-old. It's really... but then afterwards, it could be part-time. And I think that way they both get their needs met. I think there's a compromise.
But I think the word compromise is used sometimes in a way where somebody is going to get what he wants over the other. And I'll explain what I mean is, for example, myself, if I use my parents, okay, I really enjoyed coming back home and finding my mom waiting for me with the meal, right? Mm-hmm. And I hear different stories from different people that didn't have necessarily that experience. Now, were they brought up in the wrong way? No. But I want to reflect that into my family. Yeah. Is that necessarily something bad that I don't want to compromise on that?
So do you not think there's a way that can happen as well as her being able to work? Are you saying like forever, no matter the age, that's something that you enjoyed?
No. I'm saying at first, is it bad for me to
No,
want
it's
that?
not.
Okay.
Of course not.
So if somebody doesn't want to compromise on that, is he necessarily doing something bad towards the person that he potentially likes?
No, but I mean, we all have preferences. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to separate what's a non-negotiable and what's something I can discuss, because we have to choose our battles in life. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, and do you feel that approach translates in your real life or in real life in general?
Of going down to a person's...
No, it's basically understanding that not everybody has your background. And sometimes it could be, you're Palestinian and Jordanian, right?
Yeah.
So whenever you talk to somebody mm-hmm. about the politics behind being Palestinian and Jordanian, maybe they don't necessarily have that whole background. So sometimes you need to go back to 4th and 3rd grade, something that they should know, that actually Palestine existed, for example, and whatnot. So that's what I mean. Like, do you think it actually translates to life, your approach, or not?
You definitely need to. When it comes to the Palestinian cause, I mean, even I ended up learning a lot more about it because of the questions we were getting. I do want to say something. It might be worth mentioning that, saying that we're Jordanian Palestinian, mm-hmm. just as a side note, it might not be the right thing to do now that I think of it, because most Jordanians are from Palestine. Mm-hmm. So my dad's side, they always say we're Jordanian, but originally they're from Nablus. So if I think of it, by saying I'm Jordanian and my mom's Palestinian, Jordanian Palestinian, I'm kind of playing into what Zionists do, which mm-hmm. is to say, I'm kind of erasing my identity and going like, I'm from Jordan. First of all, there's no difference between Jordan and Palestine, but I've been just thinking about that, and I think I should just answer, I'm Palestinian from now on.
Your necklace.
Yes, hence the necklace.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's also a great way to start conversation about it.
That's true. Let's dive into your heritage then. You said that you studied in Jordan. Mm-hmm. So basically, were you born and raised there, or were you raised here and you went to do your undergrad over there?
It's not straightforward. So,
like with every Palestinian.
We like to keep things interesting. I was born and raised here till the 4th grade. And then 5th grade was in Jordan, mm-hmm. 6, 7 here, 8 Jordan, 9, half of 10 here, other half, 11, 12, University Jordan, back here for my master's and PhD. So a lot of back and forth.
Okay, and as a person living in Jordan, could you go to occupied Palestine or no?
With my Canadian passport, I have a better chance at going in.
Did you go?
I wanted to go last summer for the first time. I couldn't bring myself to, because with everything going on in Canada and these small encounters with Zionists on the street, it's already tough to see these people. I feel like it's tough. It's tough to deal with these people just on a day-to-day basis here. And it's rare. It doesn't even happen that often that a negative encounter would happen. But I can't imagine going back to Palestine and being completely surrounded and, being looked at like I'm inferior. Like, I need, you want to buy from us, we're going to let you in, we're not going to let you in. I don't think I can handle that experience, but I might go in the future. I just need to have a good support group with me before going.
Regarding what you mentioned about Zionists, you mentioned on the phone a story regarding something that happened in a Florida conference. Could you expand on that?
Of course. I never really had to, the fact that I was Palestinian never really showed up until everything happened in October. But despite being raised here, But in Florida, I was in a hotel for a conference, and I was approached by a man, a Jewish man. He was an old man. He was very kind. And he had, on his badge from the University of Tel Aviv, from Tel Aviv. And he kept saying, "Hi, how are you?" And he just was being super friendly. And then eventually, we kept running into each other, and he kept saying, "Hi, how are you?" And when I would answer, "I'm good," and then it would be quiet a bit, and then he'd say, "And how are things in general?" And I felt like he wanted to go into it, but he wasn't doing it. So I thought, you know what? I've never had a heart-to-heart. Let's see how they think.
Were you wearing a necklace, or he just assumed?
I was just wearing a hijab.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I guess he assumed. Unless he saw my bracelet, I doubt it.
I mean, did you have a bracelet?
I did. I had this bracelet on.
Oh, okay. Most likely.
But we were standing in line. He was behind me. I don't know. It was quite the attention to detail. And yeah, so we talked for 2 to 3 hours. It was the first and last time I think I would do that. Part of the reason I wanted to have that conversation as well, to be fair, is because it would bring me more peace if what they thought made sense. I would cope better with what's happening in Palestine if I could at least understand your point of view. I tried to keep an open mind. But what I realized, unfortunately, and there were according to him, 30 Israelis in that hotel. And he told me that 28 out of the 30 would share his perspectives, which are not extremist, but still not good. And he himself told me we do not represent the general Israeli society. And he said we have 2 that are more right-wing extremists in their thoughts. And it was an interesting conversation. It was sad because I saw my grandfather in this man because of how old he was. But then when you hear them justifying the lack of food getting in, the lack of water, electricity.
So it's post-October 7th, right?
This is all after. So it was actually this past May.
Okay. And can you tell us, what was that conversation about? Considering it was a 2-3 hour conversation, I'm interested.
Sure. I think I realized.
How did it start? I mean, you said he said, "Is everything good in general?" And then how did he He didn't just say, "What did you think about October 7th?"
He didn't. He kept. So at that point, I went for it. I was like, it's just a bit odd to be here on the beach on this hotel with everything going on in the world. And then from there he went into it, So and then I actually told him after a minute of talking, I said, "You know what? I'm hesitant to actually have this conversation with you." And he said, "You know what? There's no need to be hesitant. As long as we stay calm and respectful, it'll be fine. Let's go outside and talk." Okay. My friends saw me leave with him. They were like, "Are you good?" No, he was a nice person, but it's unfortunate that at the core, it became clear that you cannot reason. I literally told him, this man who believes that Israel has the most moral army in the world, I started quoting to him. They said they're fighting human animals. It's children of light versus children of darkness. The children of Gaza brought this on themselves. I said, "Can I please show you these officials?" And he said, "No, I don't want to see." So, and when I said, why are you justifying no water, food, electricity? He would say, "What war does allow these things?" And then he would say, I hope for peace. My grandkids, they go to a school to learn Arabic with Palestinians. I have hope for a future of peace between the two. We never should have entered the West Bank. Things like that, which made him less extreme. But then also, when you would ask him, is this considered a genocide? They're very fixated on not calling it a genocide or a Holocaust, as if it's a competition of who has suffered more. And I said, are you more comfortable with ethnic cleansing? Are you more comfortable? Either way, it's not humane what's happening. So, but for him to say it's heartbreaking, it's horrific, and then say, yeah, but what war does allow water and electricity? Like, that's, and he kept referring to the US as if it's the moral standard of the world. So it was sad to see that how much he had to, the thing is they have to lie to themselves in order to justify having this land. He says, no, I'm not okay with like massacres and stuff, but really, when it came down to it, he's like, yeah, but there are no empty pieces of land around the world. It had to be here. And I think, I started addressing the things that I find funny. I told him, aren't most of you atheists and you believe this is God's given? He laughed at that. He's like, yeah, I know, it's actually ridiculous. And but for another point, I told him, in evolution and everything, we all started out in Africa. Do you have a claim to Africa? Or do I have a claim to Saudi Arabia? Islam started there. Should I go kick them out? And, he stayed quiet a lot of the time, and you don't understand, is it the quiet of, I have nothing to say, or it's, this girl is hopeless. They'll never change their mind. She's brainwashed, So, but the conclusion is they have to lie to themselves to justify the horrible things that are happening.
Okay, so it was a very amicable yet sad conversation.
Yeah.
And you realized basically that if you're born a Zionist, they teach you certain things and you grow and you just justify them as you grow older, basically. So if you find contradictions, you just say, but that, like he said, for example, in the example of like what war permits people getting water and electricity and food. So that's how he justifies it, that's how he deals with it.
Yeah, it's also not wanting to see literal evidence of footage of their moral army and the Israeli officials and what they say. But the thing is, he admitted himself, we do not represent, we researchers and academics here, do not represent the average Israeli.
Because the average Israeli, and sadly, is justifying rape, right, in prisons?
Yeah.
So I don't think they consider that a bad thing because they think of Arabs, Palestinian Arabs, as inferior, as you mentioned.
Of course.
Okay.
Of course.
And you mentioned also October 7th extensively, more than I expected.
Oh, did I?
So I just wanted to know, do you feel like your identity changed post-October 7th, or you're the same Yara Mohiar pre-October 7th?
So pre-October 7th, we're always hearing about what's happening in Palestine, even if it's not getting any media coverage. But I always presented myself when I'm asked where I'm from. I'm Jordanian. You take your dad's side, nationality. Post-October 7th, I'm Palestinian. And I think I do that on purpose because I want, it's accurate, it's true, but also it's an invitation to have the conversation. I'm always curious when I say Palestinian, I stop and I want to see the reaction of the person in front of me. I think that's always fun and interesting. It's important to be able to have one-on-one conversations. If you're uncomfortable going up on a stage and preaching and I think you should at least be comfortable going one-on-one. I'm comfortable with that and having conversations with people, seeing what they know, educating them.
Did you notice that people in general, I'm not talking about Arabs, and I'm talking about Westerners, appreciate more the Palestinian plight post-October 7th than pre-October 7th?
Arabs in general?
No, I'm talking about Westerners.
Westerners, yes. I think it's actually very heartwarming to see the amount that are with us in the protests. Mm-hmm. And I feel I have a different level of respect for them because yes, we are all Palestinian, as we always chant in the protests, but to be realistic, if it's not a cause touching your own people, and you've never been oppressed or under an apartheid regime or really dealt on a daily level with the impact of what it means to be occupied, how can your heart really feel for these people, and for you to go out of your way week after week to show up at these protests and take time out of your day and educate people and talk about it? I have a different level of respect for Westerners who have been educating themselves on this and showing up for Palestine.
We were talking about your background being Jordanian and Palestinian, and you said that you feel more Palestinian post October 7th. When you were raised in Montreal, did you feel like you were more Canadian, Palestinian, Jordanian, Arab? What did you feel exactly?
I think I always felt like many Arabs that were raised in the West, which is that we need an island of our own where the mix exists. You never fully relate to the people here. I made amazing friends, they're very kind, but the soul or the essence and the values are quite different. And then when I used to go to Jordan, I was the Canadian girl that had weak Arabic at the time. So it was hard to bridge the gap. I'm grateful for it still, the back and forth. But growing up here, there weren't many Arabs. So naturally, I would get questions in high school. Like, no one was rude, thankfully, but I would get like, you're wearing a hijab.
Did you go public or private?
Public.
Okay.
Public school. And I also went to private at some point. But in the public school is where the mix of cultures was.
You're saying about the hijab?
Yeah, they would say in gym class, aren't you hot? Like, you're wearing a hijab, aren't you hot? And what am I going to tell you? Hell's hotter? Like, they don't believe in God. So it didn't make sense. But thankfully, other than that, it was fine. But of course, as you grow up, and especially after October 7th, the fact that I'm Palestinian has been coming up more. I'm no longer just an Arab. And also a lot more Arabs and Muslims have been, I guess, immigrating here.
During this interview, you mentioned your hijab a lot. I mean, does it mean... I tend to, I'll be honest, I tend to avoid that subject during my interviews. Is because I want to sit down. I'm sitting down, for example, with an intellectual. I want to talk about his credentials, not what he's necessarily wearing or not wearing. But considering you mentioned it a lot, I want you to explain your relationship to it. Maybe some listeners don't understand necessarily what Yara or Rima's relationship to the hijab is. Could you expand on that? Especially in Montreal, especially in the last few years where people have had, let's say, their opinions on it.
Yeah, I mean, now that I think of it, a lot of people have been stopping me and asking me about it. Yeah, not all of them were nice. But there are different reasons to wear the hijab. The main one, in Islam, we believe, okay, God asked us to do it. We don't all follow every part of Islam. We're not angels, but we try as much as we can to do as many parts as possible. But for me, my relationship with the hijab, they always sell the narrative that the hijab is to protect you from the gaze of men, but the way I've been really looking at it, that may be true to an extent, but the way I see it is it protects me from my own ego. All women love beauty, okay? That's how they sell all the products. That's how they get to you. So every woman wants to show off what she has, and I think it's humbling. It keeps you humble. It's like, no, let's contain what you can offer to the world and make it more mental, more, like you said, let me lead with my credentials or what I know and what I can offer the world instead of leading with the other parts that are more physical. I think that's the challenge. It's to yourself as a woman. It's not even about other people. It's trying to be humble with even if you have things that are like to your advantage in life, you want to be able to be humble about it. I repeated myself a lot. I hope you cut some of that out.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Most of it.
We're not going to cut it out. Messing with you. Okay. So, but considering you're in a field that's very competitive, in a field of intellectuals, most likely a lot of atheists around you, do you feel like that your hijab is like the elephant in the room that nobody's talking about? Or no, as soon as you sit down with them or as soon as you talk, people just forget it?
To be honest, I'm not gonna again play that it's been so hard having a hijab. Maybe because Montreal is multicultural. I'm grateful for, regardless what people deep down think, some people, overall it's been a positive experience. I don't think I'm viewed differently. And especially in academic circles, because you travel so much and you go to conferences and you are exposed to different people, to different cultures, different ideas. So I think that circle is more accepting and more open-minded as a whole. So no, I thankfully have had a good experience.
I want to touch also on the Palestinian diaspora. I mean, you say that now you feel more Palestinian. I had Rima Abu Draz on this podcast, that you know. Considering she's from Gaza and that you're from, you said Nablus, right? Your mom's from Nablus.
My dad's from Nablus. Yes, you were correct.
From Nablus?
My mom's from Qada Jenin.
Okay, Qada Jenin.
Yeah.
So that's the West Bank in general, right? Okay,
yeah.
So it explains why they went to Jordan. They were expelled. 1948?
Personally, if we're going to go back to my grandfather,
Yeah.
he was going back and forth between countries on business. He did not, his mother, they got expelled at some point and she told him 1 to 2 weeks max, we'll be back home. That's obviously not, but no.
But your mom?
No, they raised them in different Arab countries. So we didn't go through the Nakba in terms of my grandfather and onwards.
Just to get back to that point, do you feel like you guys from the West Bank and from Gaza have a different perspective on not necessarily what the solution is, but what the Palestinian plight is?
Well,
and I want that question pre-October 7th and post-October 7th.
Because I was raised in the West and Jordan, yes, my family, my mom's side is Palestinian, but I'm unfortunately not very connected to my roots in the West Bank. And so I don't know what the general opinion is. But I mean, it would be interesting to see if there is a difference for people who currently live there or have left recently.
So you do not connect necessarily with people from Palestine even here, right?
I connect very well. Like I love their company. Okay.
No, I'm saying your entourage in general. Is it more Palestinian, Jordanian?
Currently it is.
Okay.
Because of all the protests.
Post-October
you make
7th.
Amazing. Yes. Well, that's where all the Arabs showed up. That's where I finally found them. I don't know where they were before. There weren't as many Arabs growing up in Montreal.
Maybe you were in Waterloo.
Yeah, that too. But really, it's my childhood where I couldn't really find any.
Okay. But now that you sat down with each other, did you find a common ground? I mean, or do you feel like for example, when you speak to Rima, that she has a totally different perspective than yours? Considering she actually went to Gaza many times. I'm not sure if you watched the whole episode.
Yeah, I did.
Okay. So do you feel like somebody from Gaza that, like Rima, that went many times back to that demolished city now, has a different approach to that conflict than yours?
I don't think so. I don't believe that I will never feel and relate to the experiences she went through specifically. I'm grateful that I've been pretty sheltered so far. Alhamdulillah, I've not been through too many tragedies in life. And for that reason, I'm not going to play, the victim of I've been through this and that and I can relate so much. It's a completely different experience. But that does not mean that we don't have humanity in us and that we don't see a genocide happening before our eyes, that our parents, I'm very aware my parents are Palestinian. They tell us about the history. And so I will forever fight for the right to resist. And in that sense, I don't know what kind of little differences there could be, but they never came up in any discussion that we would have had. Yeah.
So in the hopes that you can return to Jenin and Nablus, and she can return to Gaza. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.